listening to the Construction Big Breakfast, where we give you a hearty serving of insider tips and business strategies to help fuel your day so you can thrive in the construction industry. Now, here's your host, Tip Top Tim Fitch.
And welcome everybody to the latest episode of the Construction Big Breakfast. And I'm your host, Tip Top Tim Fitch. Now, today I'm joined by three guests. Ben Pritchard, who's one of my colleagues who you've probably seen before, Davinder, Reehal, and Richard Dolman. Now, these are two guests very interesting today, heavily involved in the demolition industry. So we're going to have a big discussion about all things demolition. But first, of course, Davinder, tell me, what did you have for breakfast this morning?
Overnight oats.
Overnight oats, brilliant. Soaked overnight and then cooked on the stove?
Just in the microwave, 2.5 minutes. That was it. Job done. A few chia seeds, and that's it. Quick and easy.
Very good. And Richard, how about you?
Parma ham, cantaloupe melon, granola, blueberries, and a small helping of Greek yogurt.
Fantastic. That's a Mediterranean one.
Yes, I'm told reasonably healthy.
Sounds it. Ben?
Yeah, I was more towards sort of Davinder's, so I had a bit of porridge, some fruit, and a cup of tea.
Lovely. Well, today I had sourdough toast with Marmite. So nothing too heavy for me today, but very good coffee. So welcome everybody, and Davinder, perhaps you could just give us a bit of background, who you are, what you've done, and explain some of that huge long list of post-nominal letters you've got.
Okay, so I'm Davinder Reehal. I'm technical director with John F. Hunt. I've worked for John now for the last 19 years. Worked for John Molam and Company at the start of my career. Joined John to do one basement and been here ever since. And it's different. It's a changing industry. And I'm sure we'll get on to the fact it's changed in what we do and how we do it over the last 20 years. And before you go on about the collection of letters, it started off as a competition with our compliance director on who could get the most letters after their name. I'm winning. I'm at 23 and he's only at 21. And I said it did start off as a bit of a joke. And then over the last 2 years, it's just got out a little bit out of hand. But yeah, I've got one more set to collect and then that's it. I'm going to hang it up for a while.
And what is it that you're after now?
I'm doing another MSc. So apparently you're allowed to write MSc space MSc. I was hoping to write MSc squared.
I invented MSc squared, Davinder, because when I got my second one a few years ago, I had that. What do? Do you put MSc, MSc? And I put a square. I put a 2 above it. So I've got the.
It's incorrect, obviously.
Of course it is, but I've trademarked that though. Or at least I should do. Anyway, it's a great story. Richard, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm Richard Dolman. I'm actually a completely self-taught demolition man or person, whatever we're supposed to say now. But I started just operating a JCB excavator, a backhoe loader. I was an owner operator of that from 20 years of age, and somehow drifted towards demolition. That was 27 years ago, and now currently, as well as being running my own demolition business, I'm also the current president of the Institute of Demolition Engineers, and I come nowhere near all of you with the accolades after my name, but I have my IDE, and I'm just a year behind Davinder, completed the MSc in Demolition Management and Engineering.
That's really fascinating. I love these, when you have these contrasting career paths, it's really, really interesting. And that's one of the great things about construction, is that you can start anywhere and still make a big success of it. So I suppose we really ought to talk about how we got to know Davinder. I suppose, Ben,
Well, yeah, it's not just me. I mean, obviously, you know a number of the guys, Paul and the likes at John F. Hunt very well for a number of years. But for a few years, I've been helping Davinder and the guys sort of realise some of the opportunity from the amazing innovative things they do through their R&D tax credits. And I think you know, Davinder sort of started talking about it as well. It's amazing. You know, I first got into the demolition industry about 10 years ago, sort of through my old role in Magnox, when we started to pull down buildings all across the UK. And you have a real sort of sense of an industry, a stereotypical sense of an industry that you know still has that long swinging ball just going around wrecking buildings, but that is completely unfair. It is actually one of the more technical parts of the industry. And it's amazing, you know, day in, day out, some of the amazing things you guys do, John F. Hunt, to enable some of these buildings to come down and all across the industry. You know, some of the temporary works that you develop to do things safely, some of the complicated procedures you put in place to take out asbestos, to sort of remediate ground. You know, it's an industry that really needs a bit of a sort of flashlight on it to sort of show the rest of the world just how amazing some of the solutions you come up with are.
Yeah, I mean, Ben, thank you for that. I mean, the biggest difference, I suppose, between what we do in demolition and construction is, in construction, you know, a set of columns goes up, it takes a week. You pour a floor slab, it's another week. Whereas we can look at a building one day and the next day the floor's gone. And it's far, and that's probably one of the biggest changes. It changes so rapidly. You know, one day the guy walks onto the 4th floor, the next day he's walking onto the 3rd floor. And it's that rapid change, and how, you know, you're always moving barriers, handrails, and that constant, you know, our daily brief is probably more relevant to our guys. And Richard will say the same, we're advocates. This daily brief is, it has changed overnight. Well, it's not very rude, and I'm not, this is not detrimental to the guys in construction. If you're laying a big 4 slab, you're fixing rebar for 3 days and you might pour the slab on Friday. Whereas Friday, we might be 3 floors different and the lift shaft's gone. So, and that's probably one of the biggest, you know, and some buildings are, as you've said, you know, they are big machines and you can work your way down with them. I mean, the guys from DSM do 30-story tower blocks with a machine sitting on the floor. Whether you could ever run that in London with all the tunnels, you can't do it. So it becomes and now where we are fixes the methodology more than how we want to do it. You know, there may be 2 tower blocks, one with loads of room around it, one with no room. And as Richard alluded, the MSc, we ended up with a class of 12 people, and they could not have been from more diverse backgrounds. You know, I've never done a job in a field anywhere. And some of the guys in that course had done jobs where they had all the room in the world, and we looked at the same job completely differently. You know, there's 2 completely different solutions to the same problem. And that, I suppose, in demolition makes it unique. Whereas if you are doing columns and slabs, unless you change from Dorker to Perry, it's columns and slabs. There isn't that huge difference on how you want to do it.
No, I mean, it's sort of interesting the way, you know, you talk, your demo is obviously for various reasons very outcome focused and outcome driven. And everyone talks about how construction in general needs to be more outcome driven. It's, you know, what is the end state we're looking at, and then let the experts, you guys, work out the best way to get there, dependent on the context, the where, the what, and the why of what you've got. And that's certainly something that the rest of the industry could learn from. I mean, certainly when I was procuring sort of the demo packages, you know, you're right, everyone came up with a slightly different way of approaching it, and in some ways not knowing sort of the detail and the experts. That's why I'm sure you both know Steve Jack and some of the guys that we had back in the day. That's why we got them to come in and tell us what good looked like.
Yeah, it's, you know, it's fascinating, this, and I think this is a piece where you've clearly actually recognised it, Ben. But I think that you mentioned the first critical point at the start, whereas our industry is tarnished with this thing of blowing things up and wrecking balls and you know, go and work in demolition if you can't do anything else type thing. And you know, I always remember the last scene of one of the On the Buses, whereas they kept wrecking all the buses and things, so they put them into demolition at the end because they were no good at bus driving. But whereas now our industry, it's so construction, you can design it to death on the drawing board or CAD or whatever until you actually execute it. Whereas with demolition, we're problem solvers, aren't we? We're given something that we don't know anything about, very little information, and asked to remove it. And there's a lot has to go into that before you've got confidence to take a floor off, lift a bridge down, take a building down, whatever, and what's the surrounding things. And a part of, I think, one of the big things with the MSc that Davinder and I sat on together was that now, during that, we started to meet other professionals, and they started to talk to us and take us seriously, and looking at this whole full circle of where we're going to go. You know, let's when we design a building to go up, let's look at what we're going to do with it at the end of its life, and not just whether the building can be reused or how we're going to take it down, what we're going to do with the materials. It's absolutely endless what the things that we could talk about and learn.
Yeah, I have to remember. I remember when Davinder told me he was starting this master's degree. It was at Wolverhampton, wasn't it?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was amazed that there was the material to warrant it. But of course there is, and yeah, in a sense, we started to understand this with the work that we've been doing with John F. Hunt. And of course, my own background, I started in foundations, having done a master's degree in saw mechanics. So I really appreciate the journey that industry, your industry, is on, and it's great that it's started taking people to that level of understanding, because of course master's degrees are supposed to be the edge of knowledge, aren't they?
Yeah, well, I think it's great that the industry's now gone there and pushing harder, and we seem to be getting so I'm actually involved in the management of the course as well and the development of it, which was bizarre, which is how I ended up doing it, because when I helped develop it, I asked them if they'd give me an honorary degree, and they said, no, if you want it, you've got to do it, which seemed odd. But no, I'm glad now I did it, because the learning has been so rich. It's been great, and it's now attracting other people into the industry, and people realizing that it is a professional industry, and there's massive amounts for us still to do.
Tell me, Richard, tell us a little bit more about your institution.
Yeah, so the institute is not a trade body for corporate organisations, for companies. It's for individuals. So anybody that's involved in demolition or demolition management can apply to become a member. You can actually come to our seminars if you're not a member, and learn and gain experience. And the whole idea is a platform for sharing best practice, sharing lessons learned, sharing case studies, and generally exchange information throughout the industry.
That's really admirable. Just tell me a little bit about the history of it. How long has it been going?
You've tripped me up now. We're coming up to the 50th or 60th anniversary. I should know because we're planning it. But yeah, I think it's the 50th we're coming up to. Yeah.
But things must have changed a lot in that sort of 50 years in terms of what you offer as an institute, sort of, you know, the amount of members you have, the way people sort of see you guys as being sort of far more integral now, I'm sure, than it used to be.
Yeah, well, that's the good thing, because ignoring the degrees for a moment, even before those came along, the membership of the institute, you know, it's a rigorous process to become a member, and it's become more rigorous now with the introduction of CPD, which was introduced 7-8 years ago, and now it's got recognition as well. So now people in through the tender process, are asking how many qualified institute engineers will be working on the project and things. So it's got real kudos and understanding about it now, which is, you know, great, and it's recognised throughout all things connected to demolition.
And what's the membership look like? Is it just UK, or is it Ireland, or the rest of the world? Is it?
It's United Kingdom. We are encouraging other people from the rest of the world. We have had some members. It's just difficult for them to keep up on the CPD, and it's slightly difficult because generally the UK's far more advanced than a lot of countries with the demolition industry. So trying to align it all is difficult, but you can see it coming. And actually, I can see our international membership gaining a lot more momentum, because we've now been forced into this world, haven't we, of Teams, Zoom, and people are doing conferences differently and that type of thing. And I think it's here to stay. And I think that might become an asset to us. We're delivering seminars and things, and I think it will help grow our international membership. But our current membership is plus 400 members.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It'll
I certainly agree with you that Teams and Zoom meetings are here to stay.
Yeah.
I'm just taking this podcast as an example. We used to film these in our office.
Yeah.
Central London. So, but
It's
now
made it a bit harder to organise.
Yeah, but of course now everyone's used to it. We've been running these with people all over the world during lockdown.
Yeah, exactly. So there you go. You're carrying out successful meetings, podcasts with people from all over the world, and there's no reason why we can't do that with the seminars and meetings with the institute.
So you've mentioned there, sort of, Richard, the change the last 12 months or so has had on sort of the CPD and everything else that you deliver to your members. But you know, put your other hat sort of on now, Richard, and contractor, and you, Davinder. How have things? What's the impact on site? What sort of you know, has it made you have to innovate more, change the way you go about things more than you would normally see?
Yeah, I mean,
sorry.
one of the big changes, Richard, has been like we've got guys up at Sellafield, and now they've banned the minibuses. They don't want 12 guys in a minibus. So where people are congregating, all getting in a minibus to go through into Sellafield, and you know what it's like. Now they only want 2 a car. So we've gone from having 12 guys, 1 van searched in and out. We've now got 6 cars, and it's odd that we've gone from this let's all get together 1 minibus to this total change, and that's probably the easiest impact. But again, on sites we've had to have more welfare cabins. We've spaced guys apart. And I think the transport thing down at HS2, they're asking us, or we've been instructed not to travel peak. So the guys are getting there earlier, or we're getting starter. So we're having a longer blended day. Some guys are starting at 7, some guys start at 9. And it's just to, so you don't get this huge peak of all people trying to cram on the tube, get off the tube. And we are getting that, and local authorities been good. But the most disruptive thing probably has been the local authorities, trying to get hold of a planning officer to sign off they're all on Teams. You can't, they've all got landlines, and that's actually slowed down some of the planning process. I think I've got 3 jobs now that are all being shuffled back because we just can't get stuff through planning.
Yeah, I think this is an interesting one, because I know how the type of work that John F. Hunt do to the type of work that we do, and a lot of your work, I mean, Davinder's touched on a lot of work in London, sort of top-down type, where you wrap a building in scaffold, put small machinery on it, take it down floor by floor, which is very labour intensive, a lot more staff, which is difficult to manage, where a lot of my work, the type of work I do, is more not quite so much in the middle of a field, but a lot more, machinery based, which has become easier to manage, or not so much of a difficult thing to manage. But it's been challenging around things like welfare. Same again, we've had to put more welfare up. we do a lot of working away from home. That's been a challenge for accommodation for the guys. And again, the travelling type thing, whereas we've been battling for years trying to get guys to van share, minibus share. Now I want to go in my own van and all that type of thing. And now we're saying, here's your own van. And I'm dreading the day when we go back to vehicle sharing.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's no doubt, is there? The short-term changes in behaviour have been absolutely necessary. And I think the really interesting question for me is how much of that will change back to the way it was before. So maybe people will go back to van and car sharing. But I don't think we're going to abandon Teams and Zoom anytime soon.
No, I think you're right, Tim.
That's a permanent change.
Yeah, I think people have, with John's chatting to on the other day, we're looking at having 3 days in, 2 days working from home, and it's far more productive. Especially when you're working on a tender, as long as you've got the stuff, you can sit there and your phone doesn't ring. It's a bitch, and it does need a little bit more structure and a little bit more self-discipline to make sure you get on with it. But I think for some tasks it works, and will we have a smaller office in London? And I think that's we're seeing a lot of schemes changing from that were development into resi. You look 12 months ahead, people are looking at more resi schemes, less commercial schemes, because they're going, well, there won't be the throughput of people into offices in London.
Mm. Well, that brings up another interesting subject, because we've had a series of these podcasts. We've only published one today, but we recorded 2 more. Talking about exactly that, what is the world of commercial property development going to look like? And some of our clients are at the front end of conceiving these new developments and projects. There's a lot of thought being put in at the moment on the repurposing of offices, to make them either complete change of use, but the bit that I think is really interesting is the ones where they're thinking about how they're repurposed internally to make them feel pandemic, they don't say COVID, pandemic secure, and to accommodate the likely change in commuting behaviour. So we've heard of offices being repurposed with the ground floor, even the basement, turned over to cycle storage and changing rooms and what have you. Perhaps having offices, meeting rooms on the first floor, and then no one who's a visitor goes above that.
Right.
And then all sorts of clever changes with the M&E. There's things that can be done there to suppress pathogens of one sort or another. I think the other thing is, my own view, if you're in the fit out industry, there's going to be the most colossal boom, because I think there'll be a lot of this repurposing going on starting later this year.
I think there's major opportunity. I think a lot of things have been accelerated. I mean, we talk about that a lot of people are going to maintain the working from home a lot more, so in turn we're going to need less office space. But interestingly, on the retail side of the thing, I mean, we know that the internet was giving the high street a hiding anyway. But I was talking to somebody that was well involved in that sort of thing, and they were telling me that we were in a world of the older generations were saying, I'm not putting my credit card details into a machine, and now they've been forced to, and they've all gone, well, this is okay, we'll keep doing this, and it's like hyperdrived the internet shopping, and I feel that we're going to see more development around that, as in changing city centres to probably more leisure and resi, and in turn the infrastructure around internet shopping growing.
Well, there's no doubt that's happening because of all of the warehousing and fulfillment centres and all of that stuff. I mean, just before we started this call, we had a knock at the door, and of course it was our local delivery driver Bernard bringing me 2 kilos of coffee beans, which I'd ordered from a shop in Berwick-upon-Tweed on Saturday. And you couldn't do that before, could you? You wouldn't conceive of it. They wouldn't have been able to sell it. Who would buy a mail order bag of coffee beans, but I've rather got into the habit of doing it now. And of course, that's just the microcosm of the way the world's changing. I mean, just to pick up on that, the last time I was tramping around London, which sad to say was in November, a number of the small shops where our office is, which is in Bloomsbury, so I'm talking probably more about Fitzrovia, but some of the, on Great Portland Street and places like that, they have been turned over to cycle stores. So if you work in a small office there, you just drop your bike into this shop, they keep it safe for you. Maybe they do some repairs, I don't know. But that's showing a change of use, which, I mean, whether you can make as much money out of doing that as running a small retail business, I've no idea. But, that people are thinking of ways of using that empty space.
Yeah,
some of the money that people spend on their bikes and their get-ups and the like, I'm sure they'll pay a fortune to keep it safe for the day.
Yeah.
Well, no, that's right. I mean, £5,000 on a bike is quite normal now. It's astounding, isn't it? But there we are.
Depends on your way of thinking, but yeah, it's common, shall we say? I won't call it normal. We'll say it's common.
It's common, yeah. But there we've gone from demolition to high-end bicycles. So, gentlemen, I think we've had quite a very interesting chat. What's the sort of, where's demolition going? Obviously you've got this master's degree up at Wolverhampton. Sounds like it's making a big impact on moving the bar on the intellectual side of things and the development of people. But what about the technology around demolition? What's the exciting things which we're going to see in the next couple of years?
I think the biggest change, Ben, will be, Tim, is the BIM integration. We're now getting more and more models. So we're going from BIM to DIM. So you are getting models of the building you're trying to demolish. You can work out quantities fairly easily. And as an industry, we recycle 90% of materials. But if we can get a much better flavour of what we've got, we can improve that. And I said, we are getting more and more models of buildings before we get there. You can get the quantities down right. And I think that'll change planning and program. If you can see what glass and whatever, and the client then can see it. And I think that'll be a change on how we then deal with buildings, if you know what's there before you get there. And there is more and more of that coming out now. Is
that the first time I've heard the word DIM?
Yes.
DIM. I do like that.
Well, that could be a first. I assume DIM is demolition.
Demolition information model. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Fantastic. Richard, have you got any of your own views about where it's going or what's next?
Yeah, I'm not sure whether we should continue with DIM, where it's already difficult to attract people into our industry. But I think that digital era is massive to us. I love innovation. I don't see our techniques altering massively over the next decade or two of how we do it. But I think the digital era will take more. But the massive thing for me is, I mean, we've talked about the high-end education and things like that, is getting people into our industry at all levels. The skills shortage is a real issue. I've purposely shrunk my business down deliberately because I've recognised I can't fill it with the skills that I can find the volume of work for, which is a big deal. It's really sad, that is. But for me, it's attracting the right people into the industry, and the start of that is getting people to realise. I had a conversation with a guy not long ago, and I was talking to him about, youngsters coming into demolition, and I said to him, how would you react if your kids came home from school and said, I want to go into demolition? And he said, well, if I'm honest, I'd be fairly cheesed off about it. And I said, and there lies the problem. That and it's not the wrong answer, it's not negative, but it's generally how a lot of parents think. If their kids come home and say they want to get into various trades, they're not up for it. And I desperately think we need to change that. Yeah,
no, you're right. I mean, the demolition industry more so, but construction in general, isn't it? It's seen as a dirty job, a hard job, and it does us no credit to the amazing innovation, the sort of digital-led future that we've got, and the amazing engineering that we see on a daily basis.
I think if you club construction and all the associated industries together, we're our own worst enemy, because it's been so price driven. I mean, you look at people on site. You look at other industries, and people are well turned out in what they're dressed in and their training and just how their general appearance and things. You go onto a construction site, and quite often people on there, or a demolition site, they're not even in any sort of uniform or whatever, and because it's not there, and we're so focused on subbies doing something cheap, and there's none of that sort of development, or there's no money for improving and developing things and making things better and making it up there with a lot of other trades and industries.
Well, Ben and I have had endless debates about this, and I think construction is ripe for a bit of disruption.
Yeah, I agree, absolutely, and all the associated industries. It needs somebody to get hold of it by the scruff of the neck and professionalise it on all levels. Because a lot of people will tell you, oh yeah, we're really professional, we'll do it like this and do it like that. But the amount of times that it just comes down to the bottom line, and then people talking themselves into the bottom line because it's more attractive than the whole package.
Anyway, on that note, which is really interesting, I really must thank Davinder and Richard for your time today. It's been a very interesting insight into the demolition industry and how it's developed over the last few decades, and we've obviously been very fortunate to have two master's degree graduates from the Wolverhampton course. Were you the pioneers, just by the way? Were you in the first cohort?
Yes, we were.
Yeah, so I, as I say, worked for 2 or 3 years helping develop it and get it off the ground. I have to confess, I've not graduated yet. I handed my last piece of work in a week ago on Saturday, my dissertation. So fingers crossed I'll be graduated.
My fingers crossed for you, Richard.
Yeah.
So I would just thanks again for taking the time out this morning to come on our podcast. And for our listeners, please like, subscribe, and we'll see you on the next episode, which will be published a couple of weeks after this one. So it's bye from me.
Thank you very much. Take care.
Come to Invennt for the highest R&D tax credit you can claim. We help construction businesses get back millions in tax credits every year. Contact us today for a free review. Thanks for joining us this week on the Construction Big Breakfast. Make sure to visit our website, www.inventt.com, where you can subscribe to the Construction Big Breakfast on all platforms so you'll never miss a show. While you're at it, if you found value in the show, we'd appreciate a positive rating. Or if you'd simply share it with a friend, that would help us out too. Be sure to tune in for our next episode.